Hello, my name is Reverend Dr. May Elise Cannon. Today is Saturday, July 27th. Today is day 295. The update from the last 24 hours and over the past week, it's likely that the death toll in Gaza is already greater than 92,000, an astonishing 4.2% of Gaza's population. That's according to the report I started to talk about yesterday, an open letter that came from numerous US physicians who have spent significant time in Gaza, and I just wanted to provide more information from them. Before I do, a study also just came out in Great Britain by a group called Air Wars that analyzes the first 17 days of data about Israel's bombardment of the Gaza Strip. That report is also about the death toll. At the time, the issue of the numbers and the credibility of the numbers has been a big question. We even had bishops that felt like us using the health ministry numbers of the death toll for a most recent bishop's letter, that they didn't want to sign it because of that. And so this new study from Britain, from Air Wars, said that the 7,000 people who had been killed in the first 17 days after October 7th in Gaza, of the thousands of Israeli airstrikes and other explosions during that period, only 350 events were analyzed for this study that was just released on Wednesday. And Air Wars said independently it could identify 3,000 names that matched the ministry's list, indicating such a significant percentage of alignment with the reports that were coming out of the health ministry. And so this organization felt confident that the ministry's casualty reporting system at the beginning of the war was significantly reliable, and it was continuing to work to analyze additional strikes and explosions. So we'll hear lots more about that. The medical professionals who just put out this open letter, they said they are among the only specialists who've been allowed inside of Gaza amid the ongoing siege. Dozens of physicians, surgeons, and nurses who volunteered there sent this open letter to President Biden. They are calling for an international arms embargo. And there were 45 different medical workers who were part of this volunteering group. The letter went to President Biden and Vice President Harris, including revelations about the horror of Israel's ongoing genocide in Gaza. They're claiming that 92,000 is a closer and more accurate number to the number of Palestinians who've been killed in Gaza. In addition to the more than 39,000 killed, this is how they got to that number, more than 10,000 are estimated to still be under the rubble. There's nearly 30,000 people who've been killed by starvation and resulting complications, the lack of access to water, et cetera. And at least 5,000 have unnecessarily died from chronic disease. I'm interested, that 30,000 number dying from starvation and other complications, those are the deaths that we're not hearing about. The numbers that actually have been reported in terms of starvation have been like 24. And so this letter is really critical. They said, also, they saw indications that Israeli snipers were seemingly targeting children. They reaffirmed this claim and saying on a daily basis, they saw preteen children who were shot in the head and chest. They said every person in Gaza nearly is sick, injured, or both, with marginal exceptions, and that includes the volunteers who are working there and also the hostages who still remain in Gaza. Every day I saw babies die. They had not been born healthy, or even if they were born healthy, their mothers were so malnourished they could not breastfeed, and we lacked formula or clean water to feed them, so they often starved. 96% of Palestinians are facing a crisis in terms of the level of hunger. I have never seen such horrific injuries on such a massive scale with so few resources. Our bombs are cutting down women and children by the thousands. Their mutilated bodies are a monument to cruelty. So again, that was in the letter from the physicians calling for a forced ceasefire through international arms embargo on Israel as well as on Palestinian armed groups. All the while, Netanyahu has offered his full-throated defense of the Gaza war. Of course, that was Wednesday during his speech to Congress, where he talked about the war in Gaza as a clash between barbarism and civilization. He declared we will win. He called anti-war protesters Iran's useful idiots. Hostage's family has heavily criticized his speech to Congress. They're saying he should use the words deal now, and that was absent from his address. They said in a statement there was no mention the 120 hostages, once again tonight, who will not return home. The Israeli military has since confirmed the death of 44 of the remaining hostages. This past week, an Israeli military continued its strikes on Han Yunis in South Gaza, and Palestinians carried bodies to the closest Nasser hospital. Their injured Palestinians received treatment. This was earlier last week. Between Monday and Tuesday, the bombardment on Han Yunis killed 73 people earlier in the week. Also, this past week, Israeli forces did recover the bodies of 5 of the hostages that were found in tunnels in Gaza. The Washington Post reported about Trump and Netanyahu's meeting amidst political and personal tensions. Trump had previously been incensed when Prime Minister Netanyahu called President Biden when he won the presidential election. So in 2020, Trump was upset about Netanyahu's call and congratulations from Biden. Also, Trump has openly criticized Netanyahu's handling of the war in Gaza. So they met yesterday in Palm Beach, and the antagonisms were downplayed. Trump insisted it was never bad when reporters asked about the rift. We've always had a good relationship. I've been good to Israel. He said, I've been better than any other president has ever been. And Trump promised to make every effort to bring peace to the Middle East, to combat anti-Semitism on American college campuses. He also called for an end to the war. Trump also took the opportunity to attack Vice President Harris. He called her a radical left person who destroyed San Francisco. He posted his remarks on X. He also made comments that she was disrespectful to Israel in terms of her response to Netanyahu's speech, but he didn't say specifically what. The New York Times reported that Trump called Harris's remarks disrespectful to Israel as well in response to the suffering of Palestinian civilians, but also that he called her a radical and a bum. I shared a bit yesterday about her public comments. Harris's, after meeting with Netanyahu, she backed Israel's right to defend itself, but she said that the deaths were far too many innocent civilians in Gaza as a result of Israel's military campaign. Mr. Biden also met with Netanyahu Thursday. Netanyahu did not criticize Harris's remarks, but said a ceasefire would only be possible if Hamas understood there is no daylight between Israel and the US and that the deal would be expedited. And he hoped Ms. Harris's comments did not change that. There's been quite a bit of conversation about whether or not Vice President Harris and President Biden have daylight between their perspectives. Also reported is that 100,000 people in Gaza are suspected to have contracted hepatitis A, while polio, a disease that has been eradicated in most of the world, is now present in Gaza. And there are concerns that that could spread outside of the enclave as well, which could present a global health crisis, not just a health crisis in Gaza. The New York Times posted a piece about the economic situation in Israel, particularly how it's affecting Arab citizens of the state and also the West Bank economy. The article was called "Away from the War in Gaza, Another Palestinian Economy Wrecked," talking about the closure of checkpoints, the way that Israeli Arabs, Palestinian citizens of the state, could not get into Jenin and Tulkarem to shop. West Bank Palestinians could not leave work. Incomes have been cut, which has increased militancy. And I've talked to high-ranking US officials about this. The harder and harsher the economy is, the more recruitment there will be towards militant groups. The PA, which administers the West Bank, has paid only 50% of salaries, estimated to be about 140,000 employees. In the West Bank as a whole, the population there is about 3 million. 144,000 jobs have disappeared. 148,000 Palestinians who were working in Israel also lost their jobs, according to the World Bank. Before October 7th, unemployment was about 13% in the West Bank and 45% in Gaza. So many West Bank businesses are not only losing Israeli Arabs as customers, they lack money, they fear going out to shop even in the West Bank because of Israeli incursions. For example, the Israeli army killed 7 people in a raid on Jenin on July 5th after a larger operation in May killed 12. People are afraid to leave their homes. While in Paris, the Olympics have begun, Israel has entered Paris, and when they entered the stadium, Olympics, cheers, boos, and police sirens greeted them. France has promised an unusually heavy blanket of security for them. In its first test, it pulled out all the stops. All the while, scuffles and shouting matches broke out in the stands where fans waved Israeli and Palestinian flags. That was actually at that first soccer match, the first football match where Israel played. The Associated Press reported that the Palestinian Olympic athletes were greeted with a roar from the crowds, gifts of food and roses. They arrived in Paris on Thursday, ready to represent the war-torn Gaza and the rest of the territories on the global stage. France does not recognize the state of Palestine. Al-Bawab, one of the 8 athletes on the Palestinian team, signed autographs. And the chants of Free Palestine echoed through Paris Charles de Gaulle Airport, showing how conflict and political tensions are rippling throughout the Olympic Games. The world is coming together in a moment of global political upheaval, multiple wars, historic migration, and a deepening climate crisis, all issues that are on the forefront of the Olympics. Even though Macron said he was prepared to recognize a Palestinian state and that this could be a useful moment, which fueled anger of some residents in France because that has not yet been done, all the while Palestinian athletes walked through a sea of Palestinian flags at the Paris airport, where they hoped their presence would be a symbol of hope amidst the ongoing escalations and horrors in Gaza. Among security concerns were sports matches had to be postponed. And in the back of people's minds is the memory of the 1972 Black September attacks, the Munich massacre that killed 6 Israeli coaches and 5 Israeli athletes from the delegation in 1972. Blessed be their memory. I wanted to close with a report from Gaza that I received this morning. It said this is from a dear friend of mine. A UN delegation is inside Gaza now. There's a 4-hour delay. We had a meeting and did not take them to see our work in progress to assist needy families with cash. They spent the night here. They were able to hear airstrikes and bombardment. They're still out today. We are waiting for good news that can bring an end to this suffering. I do believe that suffering while alive is worse than death. I am not a pessimist. I never have been. There are moments when you lose faith in humanity. I am really wrong as humanity is still there, but the leaders of the world have no relation to humanity. I sound like a naive child. I would rather be such a child and not be a butcher. I would rather be a victim than a killer. This war experience has changed me to accept my fate. If it was only me, it would have been easier. I wish it happened when I was not married, that I was not a father of 4 lovely children, that I was not a husband of a devoted wife, that I was not a son of an elderly woman who cannot bear to lose her only and youngest son. I wish to be a teenager who used to play with death, never fear it, and to not care what would happen afterwards. God bless the people of Gaza, deliver them from their suffering. God be with all who have lost loved ones. And if we might play a part in bringing an end to war and violence and death, might God give us the wisdom to make it so. In the name of Christ, amen.